Today we're talking about the financial comparison between goats and cattle, done in a way that's actually fair. Most of the comparisons I've seen don't account for feed consumption, and when you leave that out, the math just doesn't work. I'm going to walk you through the framework I put together using real numbers from our operation and this last selling season, and I'll show you how to drop your own numbers in and run it for yourself. Let's get to it. Hey there, welcome to GoatWise. I'm Millie Bradshaw, animal scientist and rancher. Here we talk meat goats, feeding strategies, goat fencing, and livestock management that holds up in real life. If you care about raising goats well and building systems that actually work, you're in the right place. Let's talk livestock. Before we get into the ranch update, I want to ask you to do something for me. If you listen to this show and it's been useful to you, if you've gotten anything out of it over the course of these episodes, would you leave a review on Apple Podcasts? It takes about 2 minutes and it genuinely helps other serious livestock producers find the show. To leave a review, open Apple Podcasts, search for GoatWise, scroll down to ratings and reviews, and tap write a review. I read every one of them and I appreciate it more than you know. While you're at it, if you haven't grabbed the free kidding due date chart, head over to goatwise.com/kidding-chart. It's a simple tool for calculating kidding dates and breeding plans, and when you download it, you'll also be added to the insider email list where I share things that don't make it into the podcast. That's goatwise.com/kidding-chart. Here's what's happening on the ranch. We are deep in branding season around here. This is big cattle country, and the valley is full of calves right now. The neighbors are branding and getting ready to turn out on range, so Stacy and the kids are off helping at brandings a couple days a week. We had our first calf of the year born last week, a heifer calf out of a first calf heifer, and she's spunky. We got her cornered up and got her tagged and branded. After the trouble we had last year because of branding late, we wanted to get on that as fast as we could. Looks like we've got another cow that'll calve soon, so we'll be watching for that. The goats are out on grass, and we've been moving the electric netting every day. They are so content right now. It's good to see them heading into June kidding with time on actual grass under them. There are not many years when we get grass this early. The timing has just worked out this spring, and we're grateful for it. All right, let's talk about goats versus cattle from a revenue standpoint using actual numbers. I've been trying to figure this out in my head for a long time. Years, honestly. It just never got critical enough that I sat down and did the work until this last year. Because now we have a cow herd and we have goats, and I needed to know which ones are actually bringing in more money. Not in theory, not on some other operation, on this one, in this valley, with the sale prices that we actually got. The comparisons I'd seen before didn't account for enough. They'd say a cow-calf pair brings X and a doe brings Y, and technically that's true, but it's not a fair comparison. I think producers know that on some level, even if they can't quite put words to it. So I want to present this in a way that gives you a framework you can actually plug your own numbers into, because your operation is not my operation. Before I get into it, a quick note on scope. I'm not an economist. I'm a rancher. I did have to do some economic analysis for my master's thesis, but what I needed here was a comparison that would actually work as a factor in making ranch decisions. And for that reason, we are not including all expenses in this discussion. Just sale value, what you can actually sell them for. Expenses vary too wildly by operation. How much grazing you do, how much purchased feed you use, facilities overhead, investment in animals, all of that can completely change the picture, and it belongs in its own conversation. So just keep that in mind as we go. Now, the problem I kept running into was this. One cow produces one calf. One doe, on average, produces twins, or slightly under twins. And when you try to do a straight head count comparison, the math doesn't work out. You're not really comparing a cow to a doe. You're comparing a cow to a doe and her production. And even that isn't quite right because they don't eat the same amount. So you're comparing apples to something that isn't even in the same fruit family. What I decided to do was compare them based on forage consumption. How much feed does it actually take to run a cow versus a doe? That's the fair unit of comparison. Feed is your biggest input, whether it's hay or grass or both, and every animal on your place is competing for the same resource. So let's start there. Here are the baseline numbers. Cattle consume an average of 2.5% of their body weight in dry matter per day. Goats consume an average of 3.5% of their body weight in dry matter per day. So a 1,200-pound cow, which is actually on the low side of average for the commercial cattle industry right now, she's consuming 2.5% of 1,200 pounds, which is 30 pounds of forage per day. My does average 110 pounds, and 3.5% of body weight comes out to 3.85 pounds per day. To equal one cow's daily feed consumption, I divide 30 by 3.85. That gives me 7.8 of my does. Not 8, 7.8. I'm not rounding up because I want this to be as accurate as possible. Now let's run the revenue side. One cow at an 85% calf crop, which is the national average for weaned calf crop and a reasonable expectation for a well-managed commercial herd. That's 0.85 calves per cow. Last fall, my neighbor sold steer and heifer calves, and his average across both was $2,500 per head. That was a record high. So 0.85 times 2,500 gives us $2,125 in calf revenue per cow exposed to breeding. Now, 7.8 does. At a 170% kid crop out of does exposed to breeding, which is what we actually weaned last year and what a well-managed meat goat herd can realistically hit. 7.8 does will wean 13.26 kids. My average sale price across all kids this last year, bucks, replacement does, meat does, and wethers, averaged together was $255 per head. So 13.26 kids times $255 is $3,381. Goats are ahead by $1,256. Now, let's say your kid crop is 150%, which ours was the year before last. That's more conservative and also more realistic if you're still building your herd with first-time does or had a tough kidding season. At 150%, 7.8 does wean 11.7 kids. 11.7 times $255 is $2,983.50. Goats are still ahead of the $2,125 cow by $858. But there's more. Calves sell in the fall. We carried our goat kids over winter. We sold in the spring rather than the fall to hit the Easter market, and that costs money. Since that input is not consistent between the cattle and goat comparison, let's account for that. We fed those goat kids through the winter, all of them, and that includes the buck kids, which were fed separately but are still in this group. We went through 35 bales of hay. Our hay price was $175 a bale. That's $6,125 total. We divide that by 117 kids that we wintered, and the winter carry cost works out to $52 per kid. Let's back that in and rerun the numbers. At 170% kid crop, 13.26 kids times $255 is $3,381, minus winter feed. 13.26 times $52 is $689. Income is now $2,692. Still ahead of the $2,125 cow by $567. At a 150% kid crop, 11.7 kids times $255 is $2,983.50. Minus winter feed, 11.7 times $52 is $608. Income, $2,375.50. Still ahead by $250. Even after feeding those kids through the winter, the goats are coming out ahead on a per unit of feed basis. Now, let me run the same comparison with a 1,000-pound cow, because not everybody has 1,200-pound cows, and this is where I want to step up on a small soapbox for a minute after we do the math. A 1,000-pound cow at 2.5% is consuming 25 pounds of forage per day. 25 divided by 3.85 is 6.5 does. I'm using the same $2,500 calf price because here's the thing. The smaller cow can wean a calf every bit as big as the bigger cow, and even if she doesn't, cattle buyers have the market figured out. Lighter calves bring nearly the same price per head as heavier calves. So, at 0.85 calf crop times 2,500, the cow is still at $2,125. At 170% kid crop, 6.5 does wean 11.05 kids times $255 is $2,817.75. After winter feed, 11.05 times 52 is $574.60. The net is $2,243.15. Goats are still ahead by $118. At 150% kid crop, 9.75 kids times $255 is $2,486.25. Minus winter feed of $507, the net is $1,979.25. Here, the cow wins by $145. So, at a 1,000-pound cow and 150% kid crop with winter carry, cattle come out ahead. The numbers don't always go the same direction, and that's worth knowing. Now, the soapbox. The commercial cattle industry has been breeding cows to raise calves that work for the feedlot and the packer, not the rancher. And what that's done is created bigger and bigger cows that consume more feed, have higher maintenance costs, and their calf value is exactly the same as what a smaller cow might produce. The feeder and the packer are getting what they want. The cow-calf producer is getting stuck with a bigger feed bill, and the return doesn't go up with the cow's body weight. I feel very strongly about this. We're actually working towards making changes in our own cow herd for exactly this reason. Remember, we came into our cows from commercial herds around us that have been following the commercial beef cattle trend, and they're genetically bigger animals. It's not something that happened overnight, and it won't change overnight, but it's something we're actively working on. Back to the market side, the cattle market can fluctuate wildly. It runs on roughly a 10-year cycle. The prices we saw last fall were record highs, and they will last for a little while, but not forever. The goat market is steadier. It doesn't operate on that long cycle. It follows a predictable annual pattern year over year. And for producers who understand that cycle, it's workable. Now I want to talk about timing because it matters a lot, and I hear a lot of confusion about it. Most people in our region sell goats in the fall. We've carried ours over for the last 2 years to hit the spring market. In a lot of the country, particularly in the South, producers kid in January and sell in July or August, which is the low point in the goat market. That's when the bulk of kids hit the market. It's supply and demand. If you're not on that cycle, if you're kidding in the spring or fall, you may have options. What we've found over the last 2 years is that the price increase around Easter more than covers that $52 in feed. That's what drove our decision to hold. I thought this year's feed cost was going to be a lot higher. It felt like they ate so much more. But when I actually looked at the bales we went through and the bills, it was nearly identical to the year before, something like $48 per kid versus $52. So the math is held. That said, and this is important right now, the whole state is in a drought. Irrigation water is going to be short, and hay prices are likely going to go up. That $52 per kid number is specific to the hay prices of the last 2 years. It's probably not going to hold this year. If hay prices spike enough, the advantage of wintering kids and selling in the spring may just not be there. We might sell in the fall this year, and that's okay. That's flexibility. That's ranching. We work with whatever happens. We're also looking at some alternatives like forage pellets that can be shipped in a little cheaper, but we're not locking into any decisions right now. We have rain in the forecast. We don't know yet what hay looks like for the year. We're having some faith and waiting to see how it plays out. We have 35 bales worth of decisions to make, and we're not making them before it's time to. For producers in the South or up here who kid in January for a different reason, the math on wintering kids might still pencil out if you're targeting the fall market instead of midsummer. Just run the numbers for your hay prices, your kid crop, and your actual sale prices. That's the point of building the framework this way. And the last thing I want to say, none of this is an argument to replace cattle with goats. Nature doesn't work in monocultures, and neither does a well-run ranch. Goats prefer browse and weeds. Cattle prefer grass. They're complementary on the landscape. What this is an argument for is doing the comparison fairly before you make decisions about how to allocate your acres and your forage. Head count is not the fair comparison. Feed consumption is. Run your numbers, drop in your doe weight, your cattle weight, your kid crop, your sale prices, see what you get. If you have any questions, email millie@drycreekpastures.com or head on over to the community and start a conversation. That's at goatwise.com/community. See you next week. Hey there, thanks for listening today. If this episode was helpful, share it with another producer who's raising goats. And if you haven't already, leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more serious livestock owners find the show. As always, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for veterinary advice. I'll see you next week here on GoatWise.